swear. I don't have HIV. I don't know how this happened. Amanda dropped to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. The doctor's words echoed in her mind. Her world was crumbling, and she didn't know how to fix it. Amanda had always been fiercely independent, with her job as an event planner occupying the center of her world. She often told herself that her first and only love was her work, and nothing or no one was going to come between them. Her unwavering dedication to her career made her an inspiration to many, but it also raised concerns among her friends and family. They would often try to talk to her about finding balance, even suggesting she make room for love in her life. "Amanda, you can't marry your job," her best friend Princess had said during one of their conversations. But Amanda would only smile and brush it off, insisting that her life was exactly how she wanted it. Tony's arrival in her life didn't change her stance, at least not immediately. It was during one of these hectic weekends that she met Tony, a dedicated banker known for his calm demeanor and sharp intellect. He was attending the wedding as the younger brother of the bride and had offered to help Amanda with some last-minute decorations. Their meeting, though brief, left a lasting impression, marking the beginning of a relationship that would change both their lives. She appreciated his charm and kindness, but saw him as nothing more than a polite distraction. Tony, however, was persistent in his quiet, unassuming way. He would call to check on her after her long events, send her thoughtful gifts when she least expected it, and even turn up at her events to lend a helping hand, always without expecting anything in return. Still, Amanda told herself that her heart was untouchable. She even made it clear to Tony that her job came first, and she had no intention of compromising. "My job is my life," she had said to him one evening when he casually brought up the idea of a serious relationship. "I'm not interested in being anyone's wife or mother. I hope you understand." Tony, a man who appreciated honesty, didn't press her. Instead, he remained patient, allowing his actions to speak louder than his words. He continued to show her what genuine care and love looked like. Over time, Amanda began to notice the qualities that set him apart: his unwavering support, his respect for her dreams, and his willingness to meet her where she was. Against her better judgment, Amanda found herself drawn to him. It was as though a part of her she had locked away for years was slowly coming alive again. She realized that Tony wasn't there to control or change her. He simply wanted to share her life and walk alongside her. Before they could marry, Amanda laid all her cards on the table. "Tony," she had said during one of their late-night conversations, "I need you to know something. I am not going to stop my job to become a housewife. That's non-negotiable, and I'm not ready to have a child, at least not anytime soon. I hope you're okay with that." Tony had smiled, his eyes filled with warmth and sincerity. "Amanda, I fell in love with you for who you are. I don't want to change you. As long as we're honest with each other, we'll make it work." His response was all Amanda needed to know she was making the right choice. Tony truly loved her, not for what he wanted her to become, but for exactly who she was. And so, with mutual respect and understanding, they embarked on their journey together, building a marriage that was uniquely theirs. Little did Amanda know, however, that life's unpredictable challenges would soon test the foundation of their love. Just 1 month into the marriage, Amanda discovered she was pregnant. The news hit her like a thunderbolt, stirring a storm of emotions she hadn't prepared for. She felt blindsided and betrayed, even though she knew deep down the situation wasn't entirely anyone's fault. Her anger, however, found a target: Tony. That evening, Amanda sat in the living room, her arms crossed tightly, her face a mask of frustration. When Tony walked in, his cheerful demeanor faded the moment he saw her expression. "Tony," she began, her voice trembling with anger, "how could you let this happen? I made my stand clear to you. No children. And now look at me. It seems you married me just to destroy my life." Tony's jaw dropped at her words, the accusation cutting deep. He stood there for a moment, stunned, before gathering himself. He took a deep breath, his calm demeanor masking the hurt he felt. "Amanda," he said softly but firmly, "you told me you had this under control. You said you were handling the protection, and I trusted you. So how do you expect me to know this would happen?" His words hung in the air, and Amanda felt a flicker of guilt beneath her anger. But she wasn't ready to back down. Well, maybe if you hadn't been so eager all the time, we wouldn't be in this mess, she snapped, her tone harsher than she intended. Tony remained calm, his voice steady. Amanda, I didn't marry you to ruin your life. I married you because I love you. I'm as surprised as you are about this pregnancy, but blaming me won't change the situation. We need to face this together. Amanda looked away, her mind racing. She knew Tony was right, but admitting it felt impossible at that moment. Instead, she stood abruptly and left the room, leaving Tony standing there, his heart heavy. In the silence that followed, Tony sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. He loved Amanda deeply, but this was not the life he had envisioned. He prayed silently for strength and for Amanda to find her own way through the storm of emotions overwhelming her. The road ahead would be challenging, but Tony resolved to support her, no matter how difficult things became. Tony was a busy man, working long hours at the bank in a demanding role that left him exhausted most days. Yet no matter how tired he was, he always made time for Amanda. Whether it was attending her prenatal appointments or running errands to make her life easier, he was there whenever she needed him. He loved her deeply and wanted to ensure she felt supported, even if she didn't always show appreciation for his efforts. What worried Tony most, however, was Amanda's relentless work ethic. Even after discovering she was pregnant, she refused to slow down. Amanda's event planning business was thriving, and she took pride in being her own boss. But as her pregnancy progressed, Tony couldn't ignore the toll it seemed to be taking on her. Long hours on her feet, late nights, and the stress of meeting clients' demands left her visibly drained, yet she refused to rest. One evening, as Amanda returned home after a particularly grueling day, Tony decided it was time to address his concerns. He watched her kick off her shoes and collapse onto the couch, her hand instinctively resting on her growing belly. "Amanda," he began gently, taking a seat beside her, "don't you think it's time to take a step back? You're pregnant and you need to rest. This pace isn't good for you or the baby." Amanda sighed, her frustration evident. "Tony, I've told you before, I can handle it. This is my business, my life. If I stop now, everything I've built will fall apart." Tony placed a hand on hers, his tone firm but caring. "Amanda, no one is asking you to give up your work. I know how much it means to you, but you need to prioritize your health and the baby's. You can't do everything on your own." Amanda pulled her hand away, her expression hardening. "Tony, I've been doing this long before you came into my life. I know my limits, and I don't need you or anyone else telling me what I should or shouldn't do." Tony felt his patience thinning, but he kept his composure. "Amanda, this isn't about control. It's about taking care of yourself. I can't sit back and watch you push yourself like this, knowing it might harm you or the baby." Amanda stood up abruptly, her voice rising. "You don't get it, Tony. I'm not like other women who can just sit at home and wait for things to happen. I worked hard to get here, and I'm not going to let pregnancy slow me down." Tony sighed deeply, realizing the conversation was going nowhere. He didn't want to fight with her, but he couldn't shake the growing anxiety in his chest. He resolved to find another way to help her see reason, even if it meant being patient and waiting for the right moment. As Amanda retreated to their bedroom, Tony leaned back on the couch, his mind heavy with worry. He loved her fiery determination, but he also feared it might become her undoing. For now, all he could do was hope she would realize the importance of balance before it was too late. Amanda had barely settled into the rhythm of motherhood before her desire to return to work took over. She loved her son David, but the pull of her career was undeniable. After a few months of maternity leave, she was itching to resume her event planning business. Her life had always revolved around her work, and she felt incomplete without it. Knowing she couldn't balance her demanding job and care for a newborn on her own, Amanda turned to her best friend, Princess, for help. Amanda and Princess had been inseparable for years, their bond more like sisters than friends. Amanda trusted Princess with everything, from her personal struggles to her family life. She assured Amanda she would take care of David while she focused on her work. "I'll treat him like he's my own," Princess promised with a warm smile. Princess's devotion to helping Amanda manage her home and family made her seem indispensable. Amanda was relieved. She trusted Princess completely, and seeing how well her friend bonded with David made her feel secure in her decision. Princess took her duties seriously, feeding David, playing with him, and ensuring he was always happy and well cared for. Amanda often returned home to find her son giggling in Princess's arms, and it warmed her heart. "Princess, I don't know what I would do without you," Amanda said one evening as she handed her friend a small gift. "You've been a lifesaver." Princess brushed it off with a laugh. "That's what friends are for, Amanda. Don't mention it." Things seemed to be falling into place until Tony's work took an unexpected turn. He received a transfer to another town, a promotion that came with new responsibilities and longer hours. The distance was significant, and while it was an excellent career opportunity, it meant he could only come home on weekends. Tony was initially hesitant about the move, worrying about leaving Amanda and David behind. But Amanda, ever independent, reassured him. "We'll be fine, Tony. Princess is here to help, and you'll be back every weekend. We'll manage." Though reluctant, Tony eventually agreed, making it a point to visit as often as he could. During the weekdays, Amanda focused on her work, while Princess became an integral part of their household. Her dedication to David left Amanda feeling grateful and, at times, even a little guilty. However, while Amanda was thriving professionally, Tony started noticing subtle changes during his visits. He couldn't quite place it, but something about the dynamic at home felt different. Amanda, engrossed in her work, seemed increasingly disconnected, and Tony's weekends with his family became less about bonding and more about managing the growing distance between them. Amanda had grown so accustomed to Princess's presence in her home that she now allowed her to spend nights there whenever Tony was away. It seemed practical. Princess was always willing to lend a hand, and her care for David had become invaluable to Amanda, who was busy managing her thriving career. David, now 3 years old, knew Princess well and trusted her completely, often seeking her out for comfort and playtime when his parents were unavailable. What Amanda didn't know, however, was that Princess had started behaving inappropriately with David. Being an innocent child, David didn't question the instructions Princess gave him, and over time, her actions became normalized in his young mind. It was their secret, and David didn't fully understand what was happening. Amanda sat in front of her mirror one early Saturday morning, carefully applying her makeup as she prepared for work. Her son, David, ran into the room with his usual playful energy. With a cheeky grin, he reached over and playfully lifted the hem of her dress. Amanda's expression immediately hardened. "David," she scolded, pulling her dress down quickly. "Don't ever do that to anyone. It's not polite to raise people's dresses." David's smile faded, and he looked down, confused by his mother's sudden anger. "I'm sorry, Mommy," he mumbled softly, not fully understanding what he'd done wrong. Amanda sighed, trying to calm herself. She crouched down to his level and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Listen, sweetheart, it's important to respect other people's space and their privacy. Do you understand?" David's smile faded as his mother's firm tone startled him. His innocent eyes grew misty as he muttered, "But Auntie Princess allows me to do that to her. Why not you?" A deep frown etched across her face as she turned to her son, her voice rising involuntarily. "Keep quiet, David. Since when did you start lying? So these are the kinds of things you've been picking up from school?" David flinched at her sharp words, his small shoulders shrinking under the weight of his mother's anger. "I'm not lying, Mommy," he whispered, tears welling up in his eyes. "She told me it's okay." With a hearty laugh, Amanda shouted, "Princess! Princess, where are you? Come and listen to what your little friend here is saying." Her voice carried a teasing tone, her earlier frustration replaced by an attempt to brush off her son's words. "He's saying some things that don't make any sense. But don't worry, I've told him not to say that again. Imagine, he says you've been allowing him under your clothes. This is just child's talk." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of Amanda's words hanging in the air. Princess, who had been busy arranging dishes in the kitchen, froze mid-step. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the counter for support. Her heart began to race, each beat louder than the last. A cold sweat formed on her brow as the color drained from her face. Forcing a strained smile, Princess slowly made her way into the living room, her steps hesitant. "Amanda, what are you talking about?" she asked, her voice faltering, despite her efforts to sound casual. Her eyes darted toward David, who was now sitting quietly, his small hands clutching his knees as though bracing himself. Amanda, oblivious to Princess's unease, chuckled again. Ah, princess, you know how kids are. They come up with the strangest stories. I'm sure it's nothing, just his imagination running wild. Princess's forced smile widened, but her eyes betrayed the panic brewing within. She clasped her hands together to hide their shaking. Yes, yes, kids can be funny, she muttered, her voice barely audible. She turned to David, her gaze sharp but fleeting. David, why would you say something like that? You know it's not true. The little boy became withdrawn. He didn't understand why his mother was upset and why something that had seemed normal with Princess was now wrong. The reprimand created a rift between David and his parents, one Amanda didn't immediately notice in her busy schedule. Tony, on one of his weekend visits, observed the change. David, who was usually playful and full of laughter, seemed unusually quiet and distant. During a family dinner, Tony couldn't ignore it any longer. Amanda, he said as he put his fork down, I've noticed David isn't himself lately. He barely speaks to me, and he seems to avoid eye contact. Has something happened? Amanda, caught off guard, let out a small laugh. Oh, Tony, you're overthinking it. He's fine. Kids have their moods, you know? I shouted at him the other day for being naughty, but it's nothing serious. Tony frowned, unconvinced. Are you sure, Amanda? This doesn't feel like just a bad mood. I'm his father. I know when something isn't right. But Amanda, brushing off his concern, waved it away with a dismissive smile. Trust me, he's fine. You worry too much. Tony remained silent, but the unease in his chest didn't fade. David's behavior nagged at him throughout the weekend, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was being overlooked. As much as he trusted Amanda's judgment, he decided to keep a closer eye on his son during his visits, determined to uncover what was truly going on. Unbeknownst to both parents, David was grappling with confusion, fear, and shame, emotions he didn't have the words to express. And as Princess continued to spend her nights at their home, the foundation of trust that Amanda and Tony had built for their family was slowly beginning to crumble. David's health began to deteriorate alarmingly. He was falling sick frequently, his energy drained, and his once chubby cheeks were now sunken. His weight loss became more evident each day, and despite consulting several doctors, the tests came back inconclusive. No one could pinpoint the cause of his declining health, leaving his parents desperate and terrified. Amanda was beside herself with worry, often breaking down in tears as she cradled her son's frail body. What is happening to my son? She would cry, her voice heavy with anguish. Why can't anyone tell me what's wrong? Tony, equally distraught but determined to find answers, decided they needed a second opinion. We're not giving up, he told Amanda firmly. I'm taking him to a different hospital. We'll find out what's wrong. With hope clinging to their hearts, they visited a reputable hospital in a nearby city. After days of rigorous testing and investigations, the results came back. The doctor called both parents into his office, his expression grave. HIV? Amanda finally managed to choke out, her voice shaking. How is that possible? The doctor explained further, but Amanda could barely hear him. Her mind was spinning, her thoughts clouded by shock and disbelief. Suddenly, she turned to Tony, her face contorted with rage and grief. So, Tony, you have HIV, and you've infected my son and me, haven't you? She screamed, her voice rising with every word. Tony's eyes widened in shock, his own confusion and hurt evident. What? Amanda, how could you even think that? I've never been unfaithful to you. I don't have HIV. Amanda was inconsolable, her tears streaming down her face as she paced the room. Then how? How did this happen? My baby. Our baby. Tony, though visibly shaken, tried to remain composed. We need to think clearly, Amanda. We need to figure out how this happened. This isn't the time to point fingers. We have to focus on David. Their once solid foundation was now crumbling under the weight of accusations and fear. Amanda, overwhelmed with guilt and heartbreak, began to question everything: her choices, her trust in those around her, and her ability to protect her child. Meanwhile, Tony resolved to uncover the truth, determined to get to the bottom of this nightmare that had befallen their family. But as the days passed, one question loomed larger than all others. How had their innocent son contracted the virus? Tony and Amanda both underwent HIV tests, clinging to the hope that the results might offer clarity. When the results came back negative for both of them, the relief was fleeting. Confusion and fear filled the void. How had their son contracted the virus? The question tormented Tony as he watched Amanda wrestle with her emotions, often breaking down in tears, unable to comprehend what had gone wrong. Tony decided it was time to dig deeper, even if it meant probing his son for answers. One evening, as Amanda cried quietly in their room, Tony sat with David, gently coaxing him to speak. "David, my boy," he said softly, holding the little boy's frail hands, "can you tell Daddy if anyone has been mean to you? Has anyone been doing things to make you uncomfortable?" David hesitated, his innocent face clouded with fear and confusion. But Tony's calm, reassuring tone eventually gave him the courage to speak. "It's Auntie Princess," David finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. She does things. I tried to tell Mommy, but she didn't listen." Tony's heart sank. He felt a surge of anger and guilt. Anger at Princess and guilt for not noticing sooner. But he knew Amanda's temper well. If he told her outright, her reaction would be explosive, and things would spiral out of control. He needed proof. The next day, while Amanda was out running errands, Tony secretly placed a small video recorder in Princess's room, ensuring it was well hidden. He hated resorting to such measures, but knew it was the only way to uncover the full truth. For 2 agonizing days, he waited, avoiding Princess as much as possible and pretending everything was normal. When he finally retrieved the recorder and played the footage, Tony's world came crashing down. The scenes were worse than he could have imagined. His hands trembled as he stopped the video, his heart pounding with rage and despair. That day, he wished he had never been born. The betrayal was unbearable, by someone they trusted so deeply, someone Amanda considered family. Tony stormed into their bedroom, his face contorted with anger and heartbreak. Amanda looked up startled. "Tony, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice heavy with worry. "What's wrong?" he thundered, his voice shaking. "If I knew this was how you would turn my life into a nightmare, Amanda, I would never have married you. Your own friend, your best friend, has destroyed our son's life and given him HIV." Amanda froze, her mind struggling to grasp what Tony was saying. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Tony shoved the recorder toward her. "See for yourself," he spat, his anger barely contained. "While you were busy trusting her with everything, she was ruining our son's life. And when he tried to tell you, you brushed him off like it was nothing." Amanda's hands shook as she picked up the recorder. As the footage played, tears streamed down her face, her cries turning into wails of anguish. "No, no, this can't be true," she sobbed, collapsing onto the floor. "How could she? How could I let this happen?" Tony stood there, his fists clenched, his face a mask of pain. "You trusted her more than you trusted me, Amanda, and now look at what it's cost us." Their home, once filled with love and laughter, was now engulfed in grief, anger, and regret. The betrayal by someone they considered family had shattered their lives, leaving wounds that would take years to heal, if they ever could. With fury burning in her heart, Amanda stormed into Princess's room, her face a mixture of anger and heartbreak. Her voice trembled as she confronted the woman she had once called her sister. "I trusted you, Princess," Amanda shouted, her voice cracking. "I treated you like family. Everything I buy for myself, I make sure you have the same. Is this how you repay me? Where did I go wrong, Princess? Tell me." Princess sat frozen, her face pale and her eyes swollen with shame. She had always feared this day would come, but now that it was here, she felt utterly powerless. Tears streamed down her face as she struggled to find the words to defend herself. But there was no justification for what she had done. Through choking sobs, Princess finally spoke. "Amanda, please, forgive me," she begged, her voice shaking. "I never meant for this to happen. I have always wanted to be like you. You've been so fortunate with your career, your life, even a marriage you never truly wanted. I've been envious of you for so long." Amanda's brows furrowed in confusion and disbelief, but she said nothing, waiting for Princess to continue. "It wasn't my intention," Princess continued, her voice breaking. "But when I got close to your family, I started developing feelings for Tony. He's everything I've ever wanted in a man. Kind, loving, responsible. I did everything I could to get his attention, but he wouldn't even look my way. He only had eyes for you." Amanda's breath caught in her throat, her anger momentarily giving way to shock. Princess's next words shattered what little composure Amanda had left. "I got frustrated," Princess admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I took those inappropriate feelings to your son. At least, at least he was Tony's blood. It felt like having a piece of Tony. I swear, Amanda, I never meant to give him a disease. I didn't even know I had it." Amanda staggered backward, her legs weak beneath her. The weight of Princess's confession was too much to bear. She opened her mouth to speak but found herself unable to form any words. Her vision blurred with tears as her mind replayed the horrors of what she had just heard. Before Amanda could regain her composure, the sound of footsteps echoed through the house. The police arrived, their presence summoned by Tony, who had silently followed Amanda to confront Princess. One of the officers stepped forward. "Miss Princess, you are under arrest for child abuse and endangerment. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Princess looked up, her tear-streaked face a portrait of defeat. She didn't resist as the officers handcuffed her, her sobs the only sound in the room. Amanda stood motionless, watching as the woman she had once trusted was led away. Tony appeared by her side, his face etched with pain. He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, but Amanda didn't respond. All she could do was stare into the empty space Princess had left behind, the words of her confession echoing in her mind. Amanda had a heartfelt realization about the importance of balancing her work and family life. She acknowledged that her intense focus on her career left gaps in her ability to protect her family. Trust is important, but blind trust can lead to disaster. Always listen to your children and protect them at all costs.